Hello, everyone, and welcome to the midweek program here at the JC Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake. I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum. Today we are in the Rose Garden for no particular reason other than the weather is cooperating with us, and this is probably the last chance this year that we'll get to film the midweek program out in full sun because of how oppressively hot it can get in North Carolina. But it's wonderful because the Rose Garden is beautiful right now, and we're here doing a horticulture hour. And for those of you uninitiated, this horticulture hour, we invite all of you to bring your questions for us live, and we've got a wonderful panel of horticulturists here. We've got Dennis Carey, our curator. We've got Tim Alderton, our research technician, and of course, Greg Paige, our director of horticulture, and they are here to answer any and every question that you might have. Okay, and with the announcements out of the way, we can get started with this horticulture hour. So I humbly request that you populate the chat here with your questions. We will go through them piece by piece, but today we're trying something a little bit new for our horticulture hour. We had one of our volunteers submit some questions ahead of time because we recognize how frustrating it can be when, you know, you ask a question about plants and it's like, well, we would like more information. Can you give us more information? It's kind of hard to share. Well, she's asked us some questions and shared some photographs with us ahead of time. And we're going to see how that works. And we're going to figure out whether or not we want to continue with this format going on in the future. But we can start this horticulture hour with a question from her. Okay. And I've got, in order to show the pictures, I've got this tablet here that I will hand over to them so that they can see it. So I don't have to turn the computer. So, okay. But I will share the picture that they're looking at as soon as I have the ability to, as soon as I pass this off. But so, here we go. So the first question I have, I have a climbing hydrangea that has never bloomed. In 2020, I got advice from the JCRA that suggested I might be pruning it at the wrong time. So I haven't pruned it at all since then. Still, I have no blooms. Any suggestions? And I've just passed the picture off to our crew, and they are looking at it. It's a lovely little hydrangea on an arbor, and you'll bear with me. I will pull this up for y'all in a moment. And do y'all have any ideas about what?
I talked to Carol yesterday and I said, I had no clue. Actually, it looks wonderful. It's growing very vigorously. I said, have you been fertilizing it? And she said, no, and because that might make it vegetative growth instead of flowering. And I said, about the pruning? And she said, no, I haven't touched it for a couple of years, but the plant looks wonderful to me. It's a Hydrangea anomala, probably petiolaris, I think is the subspecies or variety, whatever. One of the climbing hydrangeas, and I don't know. Do you have?
The thing that always jumps to mind for me is fertilizer, and if she hasn't, I'm stumped also. But a lot of people will fertilize things, and that produces a lot of vegetative growth, and it doesn't favor the nutrients. A lot of fertilizers don't favor the nutrients that produce flowers. If you think of the N, P, and K, the three numbers that are on a fertilizer bag, it's the middle one is the nutrients it needs to flower. It looks like it's getting enough sun. Those kinds of hydrangeas, well, it's not uncommon for that to happen with those, is you'll have them for a number of years and get nothing, and then all of a sudden, like clockwork, it'll start to flower. So I always say a little bit of patience and maybe see what happens next year.
That's what I was telling her. She says, great. I've had it like 6 or 7 years, and it's like, yeah, I should pretty soon, you know. You're not doing anything wrong.
You would hope.
Okay, well, great. So I guess to contrast that, well, we had a picture. So let's try a question where we have no picture. And if you wouldn't mind passing that back to me so that I can get it. She had other questions and other pictures, so we'll get to those too. Okay, but right now, we say, good afternoon. Don't know if this is a question that can be answered today or not, but I thought I would try. Can someone tell me what is wrong with one of my hostas? Every leaf is brown around the edges. It is 1 or more years old. It is in a bed of 40 plus hostas, and it's the only one doing this thus far. Wondering if I should be worried about the others following.
Where are they at?
I would imagine if there's 40 of them planted, it'll be an environment conducive to hosta growth.
I'm guessing a northerner. I wonder if that was just one a little more sensitive to late freeze, or is it when it's extra white and some of them would burn a little bit more?
Under a pine tree.
Okay.
She says.
It's probably consistent lighting then.
Sun can do that, especially this time of the year when the new growth comes up. I had a bunch planted in my garden in Charlotte, and we had pine trees in the back. We took the pine trees out, and all of them look like that because they went from shade to partial shade. Too much water will do that on occasion, but if it's only one.
Certain cultivars are probably more prone to it too.
And there's diseases that they can get. Anthracnose was bad on trees and shrubs this year because that's a wet spring problem, and we have certainly had a wet spring here in North Carolina. So it might be something as simple as that. For whatever reason, that plant is weakened and it's more susceptible to those kinds of issues.
They could try moving this one hosta into a place that's either lighter or darker or someplace else and swapping, playing chess pieces and to see if they can find a spot that is better for it.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah,
hostas are easy to pop out of the ground and pop back in.
Yep. But they are, there are so much variation in cultivars. So if they have 40 of them, I'm hoping they aren't all the same. But and this is the only one. Either that or they might have a mutation.
Yeah,
that's a possibility. Okay, well let's go back to these pre-submitted questions. So this will be a question about daylilies, and I will pass this over to them so they can start looking at it. So normally my daylily flower stalks rise well above the foliage. On several plants this year, the flowers are buried in the foliage on very short stalks. Other than splitting large clumps, I leave my daylilies alone. Should I care for them differently?
Okay, this is another of Carol's submissions, I think. And we actually thought of something maybe for her yesterday. We've actually had a relatively speaking cool spring or April and May here in Raleigh. It hasn't been cold, but it hasn't been hot. May has been below normal for it. We're sitting in the full sun, or theoretically full sun. Normally it should be about 85 and we're only in the upper 70s today.
And that's okay.
Yes, and it's wonderful. The whole month has been this way. I'm thinking maybe because whenever you get hotter temperatures down here, plants will often, the cells will elongate more. And there's less stretching is just a thought that Sophia and I had.
Makes sense to me.
You can control height, at least in greenhouse crops, by altering the temperature as well. So if it's been taller other years. And that looks normal too. I hate to say it, daylilies that I grew in Western Pennsylvania, where we have cooler nights. And I'm thinking maybe that is the case. It's that we've had a much more mild spring in reality. So
and it could be responding to a lot of organic matter if there's a lot of compost or something. And again, that foliage is pushed up really high, and it's playing catch up with the seasons. That could be part of it too.
But the flower stalks are down, so yeah, it could be the foliage or it could also be the shortened flower stalks.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a thought that we suggested to Carol yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. And you see that problem all over the place, so it's good to share this information and think about these things in case we do. Okay, so let's see. Another question. So somebody says, our 20-year-old Amorphophallus Konjac produces many stems each year, but rarely produces a flower. Any tips on increasing flowering?
Konjac bulbs need to be a certain size before they'll start flowering. And if it's 20 years old and maybe you haven't divided it very frequently, you might want to dig it up in the fall and divide it and give each of those bulbs space to get a little bigger.
The lighting could have changed. And actually, I have some that are much smaller now, and I think they take shade. But if you give them a little more sun, and they'll actually flower more readily. I get clumps of them sometimes out in our monocot garden because it's in full sun. And they do perfectly fine, but I get more flowers out there, or more inflorescence.
Awesome. Well, let's do this final pre-submitted online question. Well, if I can make this iPad cooperate with me. There it is. Okay, so the question is, a Brie Arthur foodscaping class inspired me to include some vegetables in my bed. However, some of my asparagus plants top out close to 10 feet. Can I prune the asparagus ferns back? And if so, how far can I prune them without sacrificing future asparagus spears?
You don't necessarily cut the spears. You would remove entire spears and thin it.
But she wants for height limitation. Yeah. You can literally take off some of that without taking the whole stem down to the ground. Yeah. I don't know if they have true leaves or not. The asparagus are kind of strange.
Incredibly strange. Well said.
Yes. So I think you can take off the top part of it if you don't want it, You could take off the top 3 or 4 feet if it gets 10 feet easy and it not hurt it. And you're still going to have plenty of photosynthetic structures there to reinvigorate the crown, is my thought.
In my own, I have a lot of
what they do.
asparagus in my own garden. I just break off the whatever ones annoy me for whatever reason. Break them off at the base. Now I'm not growing them for food though. I'm growing ornamental
Sure.
asparagus.
Yeah, and I hope people at home are looking at the picture now and you're seeing how tall this thing is, and it could stand to lose a little bit of that.
I think you can
vegetation.
shear off the top a little. I mean, do it strategically so it doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
But
Don't do the
don't do a hedge trim.
Don't.
No, but
You can
Yeah.
selectively go in and prune.
take off the top just a little bit and soften it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should hurt the production of it.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Okay, next question. I have an 18-year-old Queen Victoria agave, which has sent up a 10-foot flower stalk. Will the mother plant die after this plant
Yes.
blooms? I hate to lose it, and I don't see any pups.
Yes.
It's dead.
It's very likely to die.
It's the Victoria Reginae tends to be a solitary species for the most part, though occasionally if one's coming out of tissue culture nowadays, they'll have multiple pups. But when you have a solitary one, it is going to flower and then dead. It does not make axillary shoots very often on its own.
Let's say by some miracle this flower happens to get pollinated and it starts to set fruit. Do you have any tips on how to maybe collect the seeds and then try and rescue it that way?
You'll have to cut that stalk down like you would a tree.
Okay.
But you would wait until it's really good
Yeah.
and dry. You want those capsules to be tan, you know, and then if it's super tall, you lay a tarp down on the ground and timber the stalk right on top of it so that it lands on the tarp and all the seeds spill out on the tarp.
I don't think Victoria Reginae only gets maybe
it's not
10,
gonna get,
8 to 10 feet tall. It's
then
not
you
too
can
bad.
break it, you can just cut it and carry it down safely. But you'll want some place to collect those seeds, and you'll get a lot of seeds. If
We've had a couple Victoria Reginae flower in the garden now, and they don't produce. That is, I mean, they might produce some seed, but unless you have someone to outcross with, I don't get too many seeds in the garden. But they totally do die. There's no coming back from them. Striata, stricta, those you'll get some tenuifolia. Those will have some axillary shoots, and they always come back. But most of your other ones don't. So.
Okay, well, good to know. Thank you. Alrighty, so Judith's asking, pruning Japanese maples. Can we do it now, and how should we go about it?
You can prune any time of the year. And I say that with a caveat, as long as it's not something flowering. So the Japanese maples, you don't have to worry about that so much. I wouldn't go really, and Japanese maples are very forgiving, but I wouldn't go really heavy because we're going to get into a hot time of the year, and you don't want to expose trunks or branches that haven't been exposed to the sun. With a lot of harsh sun, you might cause some canker problems. But again, they're pretty tough. But shaping, deadwooding, you can definitely do that this time of the year, and it's actually a good time of the year to do that because you've got the growing season for things kind of to recover. There's a lot of stuff, both small and big, from a tree perspective that you can do now. So now's a good time.
If you want to do any major pruning, and you want a structural, I like to see them in the winter, and so you can see everything. So, but yes, if it's nothing extreme.
And if it's small enough, and you can really see that kind of stuff, you can do some of that stuff this time of the year. They're super tough plants.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so next question. I have an ostrich fern that has sent out a rhizome and a small fern growing from the end. How long do I have to wait before I cut the rhizome so I can move the new plant?
Well, we're getting into the hot time of year where water stress might be an issue for a cutting or division or whatever you want to call that daughter plant. So fall would be a good time.
Yeah, I would say at this point, yes, definitely. Fall through, say, early April.
That's a fern that I've killed a lot because of moving at the wrong time of the year. It seems to be more sensitive to the heat than other ones, from my perspective. And I always have in my brain that you want to move ferns in the fall.
Totally. Definitely. Okay. That's good advice. All righty. So keeping things in the vein of it being hot, someone asks, is it just too heinously hot here for philictricum Bruni Annum? I'm smitten by it.
I have some, I think, right behind me in reality. I don't think they're flowering yet, but there has been a clump for several years right over here in the mixed border.
Yeah, before here I worked at Plant Delights and we sold it every year.
Does it need to be like put in like a shaded spot?
I thought it should originally, but these were growing in sun here and they've been spectacular the last several years. Yeah. I don't know how long they'll live, but I mean, they do fine here.
I think they're short-lived. I think they like better soil. I don't know if they like heavy soil or not.
It's possible. Yeah, and I think of them kind of like a columbines, which like you say, short-lived.
Yeah.
You let them self-sow and you have the babies that persist after a few years. So, don't be a vigilant weeder is what I guess I'm saying. Especially leave a few seedlings.
Okay, great. And I'm just seeing this now, but going back to that hosta question, Deborah just put up an interesting point. She says, perhaps an animal urinated on it. And you know,
if you have dogs, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
This brings up an important topic that we talked about today about having a centric talk about gardening with animals in your life.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you'd see that just on the tips. You
Okay.
know, that tends to be kind of an all or nothing kind of thing.
Cool. All right. Well, just thought I'd mention it. It seemed like an interesting theory.
Yeah.
If they peed on the leaf, yeah, but if they peed near the plant and the plant absorbed the salt from the urine, then you might see a leaf storage.
Or it could be the roots are damaged by a vole.
Yeah.
But I would expect them to be going to the other hostas around it though.
Herbicide too, there's an off chance if you herbicide it anywhere near it that some of that volatilized or a little bit of mist got on the ends of the leaves. It's hard to tell unless we're like right there looking at it.
Right. Totally. Okay. So the next question is, how much light do seedlings need when growing purple coneflowers, blanket flowers, and black-eyed Susans? Also, how much moisture and what kind of soil? Seed starting soil, do they need fertilizer, and are you misting?
Okay, for the lighting, give them as much light as possible. Those are prairie plants or plants of open areas. So they, and disturbance is another thing. And so they're accustomed to disturbance in the landscape, and that's when the seed will often germinate in the wild. So as much light as possible, full sun ideal. Misting, I mean, soil, I mean, until the seeds germinate, the media doesn't have to have any nutrients in it, but after they have germinated, it's probably best to give them, whether it's a pre-dosed media that you've sown them into, you probably don't have to do too much for it. But if it's a sterile media that has no nutrients in it, you'd probably want to start either doing a liquid or a slow release feed of some sort.
At a lower level than
more intermittent than misting.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. And then, you don't necessarily need to mist seedlings either. Yeah. So
the thing with mist is it creates a humid environment close to the soil where that seed is, and that's when it needs that constant moisture.
Just the initial germination,
right? And those are all really tough love plants that don't need that extra.
Yeah, they're tough love plants, and they'll survive in a less than ideal spot, and they'll sometimes be better in a less than ideal spot. So
all right. So stress as an asset.
And yes, and I mean,
those.
Yes, and you don't. I mean, if you baby that plant in the beginning, it might not transition as well, too. So
just like us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said, Greg. Okay. Next question. We recently planted several knockout roses in our backyard clay soil, so dug about 3 feet deep for each plant and replaced with 50% compost, 50% potting soil to give roots a better chance for growing last fall. They are still blooming, but they're spotty. How frequently would you recommend watering so that they start to look as pretty as the roses behind you? We've heard mixed reviews that they love water or like periods of no water to thrive.
Knockout roses are a tough rose. It's a rose that was developed to kind of get people interested in plants and develop something that didn't need all the attention that normal roses does. It doesn't need to be deadheaded. They don't need to be sprayed because they're disease resistant. They don't need a lot of aftercare. They don't need to be pruned unless you want to prune them. So it's a relatively easy rose to get to do what you want to do. one thought that I have and something that I preach to people when you're planting is work with what you have. So what you in essence have done, if you've dug a 3-foot hole, you've created a container for that plant to live in. So those roots aren't going to go out into the native soil. Also, all that organic matter is probably keeping it more moist than it normally would need to be. So you probably don't need to water them, you know, as wet as it's been this spring.
Yeah, we don't even water the roses here in the garden, even whenever, I have to be really taking pity on them in a very long dry period of more than a couple weeks without rain in the summer.
Yeah, roses,
I don't do anything to them.
Roses,
they are not finicky.
Roses need tough love in terms of watering because you cause a lot of problems when you overwater.
And how are they watering? Are you using an above ground irrigation, or are you using drip? In this case, that if you're using mist heads or spray heads, that could be causing the foliar issues. Typically don't get foliar issues on knockouts.
Yeah, they rarely get, I've not ever seen powdery mildew. Yeah. They get black spot barely.
Yeah.
When other roses are completely defoliated, you might see a few leaves that have them, ones that stay wet. You shouldn't use overhead sprinklers for roses because if you look behind us, you see all these flowers that have been hit by all the rain that we've had, and they get kind of mildewy and they'll cast off. So overhead watering does the same thing. It stays in the foliage too long. They can get burned by the sun. It's a breeding ground for diseases. So, you know, in the future, plant in the soil that you have, mulch, which will help with the nutrients. You can add a little bit of compost in there. You can do some late season fertilizing if you need to. Full sun, tough love on the water. Drip is better than overhead. If you've got to do overhead, do it early in the morning so that it's got a chance to dry out for the day. Don't turn it on at night so that they stay wet all through the waning hours of our hot, humid summer nights that are sure to come. So you know, err on the tough love with the water.
Awesome.
Yeah, the amendments it sounds like they replaced the soil and like you said, amend the soil is great to some extent. Do a whole bed amending it, but don't just take it and put it was compost what was it?
Potting mix.
And potting mix. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
right.
The compost is good because it's going to break down in the soil and work with the microbes. The potting mix in the soil has a lot of inorganic materials in it. You know, some of the things that they use for the drainage, they're never going to, perlite and those sorts of things. They're not going to break down. They're not going to provide any nutrient value. You know, compost is good enough to use for that, but do it by bed, not individual.
Not a pot.
Not individual holes.
For sure, and especially if you're digging into clay like that, you're fundamentally putting a container in the ground.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's just not all going to work well together. So prepare your beds, not your holes. Okay, next question is, I want to use Epsom salt to fertilize my tomatoes. What is the dilution rate?
Look online.
I'm not a tomato guy. I eat them, but I don't grow them.
I don't even eat them.
For sure.
But that may help with your blossom end rot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and that's so like Epsom salt's like magnesium and that would be the major
and calcium.
deficiency. Okay.
Calcium and magnesium are the.
Okay. Well, I think before you fertilize with Epsom salt, you need to ask yourself, why am I fertilizing with Epsom salt? Like
Don't just add it because someone said to add it. We have NC State has some great publications on starting vegetable gardening. I would look at that. I would urge you to get a soil sample of your garden soil, and from that soil sample, they'll recommend what you need to grow whatever you're trying to grow.
And with Epsom salts and any kind of fertilizer, it's much better to be conservative with the rates instead of liberal with the rates.
Yes.
Because you can very easily give them too much
toxicity.
Fertilizer. It'd be kind of like putting too much salt on your French fries. A little bit's good and too much is bad.
Absolutely. Well said. Okay, next question. I have 4 Gerard azaleas which get deformed leaves. They look thick and very hard and fleshy. These leaves are also lime green, where the leaves are naturally variegated. Can you tell me what causes this and what to do about it?
There's a gall that will get on azaleas that causes that tissue to look kind of a chartreusey green, and kind of very fleshy. You shouldn't see that on a lot of leaves. You might see it on a few. That's the only thing that leaps to mind.
I don't know the diseases of azaleas.
Yeah, that I've ever encountered, and I think that's caused by an insect. But you shouldn't see it on all your leaves. That's something that, again, we'd have to see that to really give you a good kind of diagnosis.
Take a sample to the extension, that is the disease clinic.
And that's all. That's a easy Google. Just Google the extension office that has a disease clinic. Those are usually manned.
They will look at it under a microscope and test for fungi and bacteria and various other things all at one time.
Cool. Yeah, they are a wonderful resource that we have here. Okay, somebody says, I asked this a month or two ago, but how can I stop banana tree shoots coming up everywhere? I was told to keep cutting them off and they would die, and I have cut these new shoots daily for the last month and they still keep coming up. Okay. Is there any way to keep the one happy banana tree going but stop the rest?
They aren't trees, for one, so there is there's axillary buds underneath the ground. They're herbaceous plants, so it's just like a giant canna. Think of it that way. They're more closely related to them and gingers. And there are rhizomes under the ground. If your plant ever flowers, it's going to die. That center plant will die, but those axillary ones will be the replacements for it. If you're wanting a banana that does not sucker, grow an insete. You have a musa, would be my recommendation, or a musella. Structurally, they're going to look a little bit different, but they are not going to have the problems with them suckering. You probably have Musa baju, and it is a big clumping species. Yep. You just have to get your spade shovel out if you don't like them, and you have to start digging. And if you finish yours, you can come and dig mine in the Asia Valley. I actually need to get a large piece of equipment in at times. It's probably the easiest way to do it. But
I like that they do that.
I do too.
Just last week I was talking with
they don't grow solitary. They're not a tree.
Yeah. But it's just like the way they move through the garden. It's really cute. Yeah. If you walk through that archway with the food dogs out front, you'll notice there's our big planting of bananas on the left, and there's some
on the right
gone under to the other side.
No, they didn't go under. I planted them separately.
Oh, okay. Well, it looks.
There's two different species.
They look like little gnomes that have come up. They're different heights, and there are like several of them. I like coming through there at different times of the day.
But if there's someplace that can grow, we're borderline for growing insete. You can get that banana. It's a different species or different genus of banana. They are solitary. If you want that pseudo tree-esque look, that might be, I hate to say it, remove your Musa baju and put an Insete ventricosa in. And it's not as hardy, it won't survive every winter, but you can have that single pseudo trunk.
And there's some tropical ones that you can do,
exactly.
But you got to bring them in every year.
But again, they're gonna still sucker.
Yeah,
sure.
So.
And I appreciate
Musa is not gonna be a stationary plant.
Yeah. So. Well, thank you for being so botanically accurate.
There's three different bananas. Don't get me into bananas.
Well, this program is highly educational and informative, so thank you very much for that. Okay, next question. Agapanthus. Sorry, that's not a question. They said, I put 2 in a 10-inch pot 3 years ago. Good potting soil, plenty of water and sun, occasional feeding. It is multiplying excruciatingly slowly and has had 1 bloom stalk. What am I doing wrong?
That's a plant that loves heat.
Yeah. Where are they at? Yeah.
Do we know where you are?
It loves heat. It loves full sun. It's
I can't grow
likes
them.
Maybe less water than average.
And in a pot,
I'm thinking it's a West Coast thing,
they grow really well in California, South Africa. They've naturalized in New Zealand. Washington, they do great. Yep. They'll grow here. They aren't like they are out there.
No.
So, but in a pot, I've had them flower in a pot. So they want to be settled into a pot.
Yep.
They do not. They actually like to be a bit root bound to flower well.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm noticing is they say good potting soil, which my question is, what does that mean? It's probably a peat perlite mix. Probably holds a lot of water. It's probably just what they bought at the store. And there are other ways to get better drainage in your containers than just using. We had Brie Arthur here recently, and she said she's done with peat just because it holds way too much water here in the South. She would rather.
And then if it does dry out, it never rehydrates.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not sustainable either.
That's my 2 cents. Is maybe the good garden soil, it's too good. Maybe it's holding too much water and not allowing the drainage.
I don't know. They're slow for us in the garden in this area. I just planted a white one outside the white garden, and they're coming into bud already. But they were really nice divisions, and that's what selection. It might be a different selection you want to get.
But that's a good point about them.
Some are
doing
different.
well in kind of a pot bound situation. All the ones that I've seen that have done well are ones that are just jammed in there. And we would drag them in and out of a garden I worked at. And when they were out in the heat and the sun, they went crazy.
And if you didn't buy yours from someone who sells, there are varieties that will do better here in the Southeast than others. And so certain more of the local or regional nurseries will know which ones do better. You know, Storm Cloud and what's...
I don't know. Let's see. One that's doing reasonably well for us, I think, is... darn singer, blind singer. Stevie's Wonder. Stevie's Wonder has been doing well.
Yeah, that's an excellent one. But not all Agapanthus for the Southeast perform the same.
And it's like the one I just planted outside the white garden is one that's been successful outdoors in Michigan in zone 6-ish. A, B ish. So I'm really looking forward to trying that one. But they're coming into bud already. So.
Great. Well, it just seems like the theme of today is don't be so caring and gentle to your plants.
Yeah, torture your plants and
It's not bad advice. And actually, we can stay in this same vein here. Yeah, someone says they've been watching a lot of English gardening shows and they get angry that they can grow anything over there. But seriously, they always slice through the roots after removing a plant from a plastic pot. And they swear it stimulates good rooting. Is that true?
It's important when you're planting trees, shrubs, even perennials, to break up that barrier that's been created by that plastic pot. And I talked about this a little bit weeks ago when we did the planting thing, but it's crucial. The most important component of that is not so much that it stimulates roots, is it breaks up those roots from staying in that circle or square or whatever. If you don't do that, they're going to continue to grow around. And it's more important with trees and shrubs because those roots will actually girdle and kill the plant. Where this is a huge problem is more with like urban trees. So you think, if you think about the process of that plant's life, it started out as a bare root, probably was in a quart pot, and then in a gallon, then in a 3 gallon, then in a 7. And through that process, it probably never got those roots disturbed. So you've got several generations of root systems that are just doing this. So yes, it's important to do that. And you can do that a number of ways. You can take a spade. I like a cultivating fork that's got like the 3 prongs. We affectionately call those root ticklers, and just really rip those up to disturb them. When you plant it, you can splay those roots out in a way and fill the soil in around, and it's going to be much happier down the road. That's the most important aspect of planting anything.
I love that.
Yeah, it's be mean to them initially is what I say. And then, I mean, if they'll either survive and or they'll sit there and slowly die. Yeah. That is survive and thrive, or sit there and slowly die.
At least give them a fighting chance.
Yes.
Yeah, and don't forget, plant death spells opportunities.
Yes.
More plants for you to plant. Okay, next question. What are the red roses behind you?
Oh, let's look here real quick. It is Meimacota is the cultivar name, which I don't know how you say that.
Meimacota.
Yeah. The trade name is the Grand Champion.
Okay. Wonderful. And they also asked about this pink one behind me, and its cultivar name is Biaypso. I'd love to hear Greg give that a shot.
Let me look at it. I need to see
the way you said the other one was
Biaypso.
That was good.
So the names, the cultivar names typically come from the breeder.
Yeah.
And then they add a little bit of a suffix to it based on what they when call it, kind of sometimes.
So BAI is Bailey's Nursery, and most of their roses will have BAI as a cultivar name, and this is Milan Nursery. Which is a famous breeder.
I think. I think it's France.
It's somewhere overseas, Is it France or England? Yeah. And so they'll all have MEI, and it's common.
Yeah, and the trade name for this pink one behind me is Easy Elegance Calypso.
And it's often easier just to go with the trade name, especially if you're Googling these plants for finding more information about them or selling or buying them or whatever. I would Google the trade name rather than that weird
Yeah.
cultivar name, because not every nursery will put the cultivar name on their website.
True. They won't. Okay. Good to know. All right. Next question. I have 2 natural areas covered in English ivy. Is there any other product besides Roundup to get rid of the ivy so I can plant in the fall?
So you get someone to dig it all out.
That's what I would start. That's what I would start with. I would start with
Hire somebody.
with mechanically trying. Herbicides are going to really be hard on mature ivy because that coating is super thick. You're going to have to add something to it to keep it on the leaf longer. But I would start with mechanical. It's horrible to do, but it'll give you appreciation for never planting it again or having it in your life. So take out as much of it as you can by hand. Pull it out of there as much of it as you can. And as it comes up, it's going to be easier to pull out. It's also going to be easier to treat it with herbicide. The best time to spray that with herbicide is early fall, because that plant is taking all of its reserves down into its root system. So most of that broad spectrum herbicide is going to be moved down into the root system. Don't go crazy with an herbicide, especially around a tree, even more, especially around other plants. So you don't want to have that translocate. You don't want to do it in the middle of the day when it's above 80 degrees, because a lot of chemicals will volatilize. They'll turn into gas, and that gas will float up and go into the tree canopy or into your neighbor's yard or into plants that you want to keep. And if it's something you inherited, I feel bad for you, but that's the best thing to do, is try to get as much of it out by hand as you can.
And you're still going to have to remove the skeletons too.
Yeah.
And I like manually doing it. You get rewarding. It's rewarding seeing it going down and down. But it also you're going to have to work that soil up too if you're going to replant. And I figure I'm working up that soil. There's often really nice organic matter gets down in those ivy leaves, and you're working all that stuff back in there and prepping for your next plant you're going to put there.
Awesome. Good advice, but I do not want to be in your shoes.
No, it's no fun.
No kidding. Okay, and next question. I accidentally skipped over Judith's question for the sake of keeping things thematic, but we'll go back to it. She says, Azaleas moved here from the coast 7 years ago and planted her azaleas at the edge of the woods, but they're not blooming great. Do you have any suggestions?
It depends on how shady it is and also what type they are. Some of the deciduous ones actually can take more sun than people give them credit for. It depends on how long they've been in the ground also.
What are they growing under?
Whose
root system's there?
Right. Is all the moisture being pulled out by a really aggressive red maple or willow oak or something like that. You might want to do some pruning to supply a little more light, either do some limb lifting or some structural pruning in the winter so that vignettes of light can come through. They need a little bit of light to produce flowers. They don't need dense shade for that. They'll live in dense shade, but they're going to flower with some a certain number of light hours per day. But a lot of it depends on the types too.
Okay, great. So we got a couple of interesting comments about that ivy discussion, so I'd like to bring those up real quick. Somebody says, I've heard you can rent a goat to come eat English ivy. Is there any place you know of locally that offers such a service?
I don't know anybody here, but I worked at a garden where we did that, and they do okay, but a lot of times it comes back. I worked at a garden where we did that because of English ivy and poison ivy. And they mowed everything down.
Exactly. They'll mow everything down. They are not selective by any means, and they'll have favorite things.
So what they typically do is they'll fence them in an area that they want to clear, and if you've got garden plants in there, they'll eat that too. So it's in theory, it's a great idea. You could combine it with that yoga where the little ones jump on your back in the garden, and they can do a little bit
stress relief.
Yeah, a little bit of stress relief too. But it's something that's done on like a big kind of commercial level, where you've got a section of woodland where English ivy has come in as an invasive plant, and there's not a lot of understory stuff anyway because of deer pressure and just the shade of trees, and it works okay that way. They don't get the roots out, unfortunately. It gives that ivy kind of a bad day, but it's good. It's better on those bigger kind of applications where you're trying to get rid of it from an invasive weed standpoint.
That is curious. Yeah, I don't know of any companies that do that either.
Right.
But
I bet there's some here.
I'm sure, or maybe some farmer who has some goats would just try it
Honestly.
with you. And they work with kudzu too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if there's any entrepreneurs in our audience that want to start an endeavor where they do goat weeding and goat yoga simultaneously, you got to have the goat yoga too. I feel like that was crucial. But we won't be upset if you steal that idea and run with it.
There's nothing cuter than little goats. Maybe
Absolutely.
little goats in sweaters.
So there was another comment about English ivy. They said, I read white vinegar sprayed on English ivy will also work. Do you know anything about that?
Vinegar is often sold as an organic herbicide. The toxicity level of vinegar is actually higher than Roundup. I've got a talk that I used to do that had some pictures of somebody that was using vinegar and spilled it on their feet, and the blisters that ensued were horrific. It also isn't registered. You can buy it as a organic herbicide, but when you mix it yourself, too much is often used. And what that does is it burns the foliage, but that's as far as it goes. The root system just comes back. It's advertised a lot to use like in sidewalk cracks and things like that, but it flash burns. It'll kill that foliage, but the root system comes back eventually. I try to steer people away from that. Because the toxic, I mean, it's basically
It's acid.
Vinegar is an acid, and you can do bad things with that. You know, if you looked at, there's a thing called LD50, the lethal dose 50 of anything, and it's higher on vinegar than it is on most registered, researched, trialed, and often used herbicides. So I steer people away from those organic things.
And the stuff you buy for herbicides are often much more concentrated than the grocery store vinegar, which is diluted down until it is safer. So you get acid burns basically.
No kidding. Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we don't want that.
Not one little bit.
So if you do have to do that, if you do choose to anyways, gloves, long pants, shoes, don't expose your skin to it. Eye protection.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is a caustic chemical. You should take care of yourself when using it. Okay, let's see. Next question. What could cause a rhododendron to have the buds turn brown and never open? And this isn't a riddle.
There are borers that will get into that part of the tissue. Black vine weevil sometimes that kills stems. The cold, we had a crazy winter where it warmed up, it cooled down, it warmed up again, it cooled down again. That often will do that. You know, there are some diseases. Again, we've had a very, very wet spring where that'll happen. If the plant itself is getting too much moisture, those buds can often fail, and the very new leaves will do that also. So it could be any of those number of things.
Okay. Alrighty, so the next question, and this is from Catherine, and I feel like we're going to need more information, so please be ready if you are able to do so. But she says, the banana that you recommended, and I don't remember which one it was, but she's asking, would it be hardy in Richmond? And then she says, mine have bananas that live through the winter.
Okay, the one I recommend that doesn't, it's a single pseudo trunk. There's no wood there. Or Ensete ventricosa. And Morelia is the most common one you see. You'll see it as a red banana. It's dark foliaged.
Would you be able to spell that genus name?
Ensete is E-N-S-E-T-E. Yeah, Ensete. Ventricosa. And it's a little bit more squat looking plant to me, but it's a central pseudotrunk, one pseudotrunk. They don't produce axillary buds. They are naturally one, unless you do mechanical injury. And they do that for propagation typically, but
There are ways to zone push with bananas too.
and it's not overly, it wouldn't be hardy. It's borderline here and it'd be borderline in Richmond.
Yeah, even
best.
more so in Richmond.
Yeah.
A ring of chicken wire filled with leaves. You just have, for the winter, a kind of a winter blanket thing. You have to remember to get those leaves out of there quick.
Yeah.
Once the weather starts warming up.
Sure.
So, but you can zone push bananas using various techniques, which you can find online.
I have friends in Philadelphia that grow this, and they dig them up every year and put
they're easy.
them in the basement.
Yeah,
Dig 'em
you
up,
can
put 'em
just
in your basement.
you dig them up and with a relatively small root ball and lean them in a corner.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. So the next
I did that
question.
back home.
A few years ago, you put a beautiful white poppy, maybe an oriental poppy, in the white garden. Do you remember the variety?
It was one of the Iceland poppies. So it was a nudicale, and I don't remember what the series name was for that. But it was white Iceland poppies.
Sure. And it'll still be annual here?
They're annuals. We were able to get them at a local nursery, and we planted them, I think, in December, and they flowered in the spring.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah.
All righty.
Further north, they can be perennial, but here most poppies are annuals.
For sure. Okay. Did you say that all columbine will die back, and what we see each spring are from the seeds dropped?
They're relatively short-lived. You might get 2 to 5 years out of an individual plant, but they tend to self-sow, and that's how you let them self-sow to perpetuate themselves, because they're not going to be a long-lived plant like their cousin, the peony, which is actually in the same family, the Ranunculaceae, which will live for 100 years.
And if you have purchased more than one color columbine,
they'll blend, they'll hybridize.
Those babies will be blended color. I had pink and purple.
Yeah.
10 years ago, and now I got all mauve.
That's fine.
There are some select strains you can get. Nora Barlow's an old one, for instance, that I can just think of offhand. But or if you're going for with a specific species, like if you have Canadensis, you're probably going to be fine. But they're going to self-sow. Individual plants are not long-lived.
Okay. All righty. So, next question: how to take a cutting of wax myrtle and care after cutting?
Right now, you can do it. It's not too difficult. I mean, at this time of the year, you're going to do softwood cutting, so it's probably the top 3 to 6 inches. Make a nice clean cut. Use you could probably use a fairly basic rooting hormone for that, so like a Hormonin 1 or just the root tone that you can buy, or you can go as complicated as some of the gels, which we've been using a lot here at the garden, but you don't need that for those. And put it in a container, and you could put just a couple cuttings in a pot, for instance. Put a little bag over top of them just so it's not touching the leaves, and stick it in a partially shaded spot, not in the full sun by any means. You don't want direct sun, and you'll probably get something to root.
Beautiful.
But, wax myrtle aren't too terribly difficult.
Yeah.
So.
That was a great answer, Tim, and I would like to add to that answer.
We have a propagation workshop this weekend.
Yeah, we have a
and I have some openings
workshop
for my class.
There's plenty of room in both the advanced and beginners propagation workshop that we got going on this weekend. So we gave you that little rundown on how to do the cuttings and the aftercare, but we will go into much more depth.
At least in the beginners one, is much more depth. I will help you in the other one, in the advanced. It's so taking into account that you've probably taken our class before, and it's more, I help you, I give you guidance, but I don't give you the detailed class.
For sure, but Sophia in the beginner class will go into detail and give you all the information to not just take cuttings of wax myrtle, but any and everything, going into the theory of the different treatments that different kinds of plants might want. So it's an incredibly wonderful opportunity, and there's lots of room in those classes to sign up, and there is still time to sign up. So make sure you do if you are interested. Thank you for dropping that in the chat there, Arlene. Okay, next question is, what do you do with hostas that have been damaged by deer? Do you cut them back? We have fenced up the area so they shouldn't come back, keeping fingers crossed.
If they've fenced it off, that's the key thing there, to keep the deer from eating them again. And they'll probably resprout without too much of an issue. They may be stunted a little bit this year, but it would be the following year. It depends on the cultivars too. Yeah. Some flush more consistently through the summers. Others are more, they flush once or twice, and others just keep on going. So,
and if they've eaten them back too hard, they might just go dormant for the year and come back next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just be patient.
All righty, we got a question for Jimmy. Back to the English gardeners. They're crazy about Veronicastrum.
Okay.
Have you seen it available here, and does it do well here?
They're natives. But
What do you mean?
I've tried them in the garden. I don't get a lot from them, but they are natives to the eastern United States. But yeah, I've seen them in England. They're gorgeous over there.
It is a plant that'll grow here. I use them in some of our prairie plantings because I like the big tall. We got them from North Creek Nursery, which is it's a wholesaler, so they're not somebody that the general public can buy from. I always tell people, ask your garden center to get them. If I can get them,
or look online.
They can get them. Yeah.
If all else fails, it's online.
Look online, and there's got to be a mail order nursery that sells them someplace.
They're not as common as Veronicas, which
No.
they are like a giant Veronica.
Right.
More
It's a great plant. It's a
But
really
yeah,
nice
and they're
plant.
a prairie type species.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they're native. I mean, I don't know if it's the rabbits that have enjoyed them, or if they. Yeah, I don't have a good clump in the garden. I have a few, I think, maybe left in one spot, but.
Yeah, it's funny how North American natives nobody cares about until they wind up over
In England, and then it's like they become popular over there, and we get them back here.
Yeah.
Echinacea.
Same thing.
For sure. Okay, next question. Viburnum orientale. They bought one from the JC Raulston plant cart. They're asking if it goes in full sun.
Ours used to be in full sun. It's now in part shade. It's outside of the lath house. So yes, it'll take full sun.
Okay.
Partial shade's good too.
Easy peasy. Let's keep it rolling. I like this question. Please explain a copyrighted plant that a gardener owns. Are you permitted to propagate it?
You mean a patented plant?
A patented plant. Yes.
We can't. It depends on whose plant it is, but we can't propagate it and sell it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
That's their right to do that. We can propagate it in some cases, not many, and keep it in the garden, but it's not something that we can sell. We let people, some nursery people take cuttings here. Those plants are usually hands off to respect the people that are letting us grow those plants.
You have to have a permit to a license to propagate them commercially.
Right.
Yes.
So
if
that
you're
you pay a
dividing
license
that
fee.
plant, that perennial that's in your garden, you're probably no problem.
Yeah. No one's gonna know.
Yeah.
But don't go online and sell them. You
Yes.
can get
Don't
into
do it on Etsy.
serious trouble doing that.
For sure. Okay. Is Dogwood Anthracnose a disease of the past? And if not, how to know if you're buying a diseased tree?
There's no way to not know that you're buying a diseased plant of any ilk. If you're buying from a reputable grower, that's going to be less of a concern. Dogwood anthracnose is a very deadly disease of dogwoods, but it's not the main killer of dogwoods. When that Dogwood anthracnose became popular when I was in college, and I think it was made popular because a researcher wanted to get a lot of money to study it and come up with controls. Powdery mildew is a much more damaging disease to dogwoods than anthracnose. Anthracnose occurs mostly in landscapes. You don't see it that often in its natural area. And it's not as bad as a problem as powdery mildew. One thing that's been good with all kinds of diseases is there's been a lot of research on disease-resistant cultivars, and the University of Tennessee came out with a whole slew of them. So I would focus on those if you're looking for ones to replant or plant in your garden. Again, that's a quick
The
Google.
Rutgers ones, this interspecifics between Cusas and Floridas.
Rutgers University developed ones between the Asian one, Cusa, and our native Florida. Those have big flowers on them. The growth habit is more like the Asian ones, but those are really good landscape plants too. Great fall color, heavy flowers, great big flowers, lots of really good disease resistance, and more heat tolerant. So those are ones to look at too. So just look up disease-resistant dogwoods, and you'll come up with a whole slew of things. The ones out of University of Tennessee are probably some of the best ones.
And those are straight Floridas.
Those are straight Floridas. Appalachia Snow,
Yeah.
that's a really good one, and I think those kind of had those names in them. But those are all really, really good ones. Cherokee Princess is another one. Those are the ones that you want to go. keeping plants stress-free is the best way to keep them disease-free. So proper watering, proper mulching, proper pruning, correct planting, all that kind of stuff. That kind of eliminates the problems of things like anthracnose and other things. That was a long answer.
It was a good answer. And it looks as though the questions have dried up and the amount of time left in our horticulture hour is dwindling. So I believe we can call it. This has been a good one. So thank you so much, Dennis and Tim and Greg, for answering all these questions. And thank you everybody for tuning in and supplying your questions. It was wonderful to hear from you all. I didn't hate the prospect of pre-submission of questions, particularly because those photographs, they did help. So the next horticulture hour will occur in the month of August. And if you send me an email with your questions and photographs in the month of August, they may just make it on this program. I cannot make any promises if I get emailed outside of that month. But so yeah, if you want to submit questions for the next horticulture hour, please, you can look up my email address on our website and send it that way. Our next midweek program will be next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We will be doing June gardening tasks for the beginning of June. So I hope you all will join us for that. Thanks for coming out today. We'll see y'all next time. Y'all take care.